15. Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap Jesus in what he said. So they sent their disciples to him, along with the Herodians, saying, "Teacher, we know that you are sincere, and teach the way of God in accordance with truth, and show deference to no one, for you do not regard people with partiality. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to the emperor or not?" But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, "Why are you putting me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin used for the tax." And they brought him a denarius. And then he said to them, "Whose head is this, and whose title?" They answered, "The emperor's." And then he said to them, "Give therefore to the emperor the things that are the emperor's, and to God the things that are God's." When they heard this, they were amazed, and they left him and went away. The Gospel of the Lord. And in case you didn't receive the sermon outline and my thank you note, my friends here, we're going to pass out those and get up in the balcony too. So just raise your hand if you didn't receive one, and they'll get one to you. The next 2 weeks, we're going to hear a lot about political campaigns as they heat up as we approach Election Day on Tuesday, November 4th. I'm guessing that most of us will be glad when that's over. I know just in our household, yesterday we received 6 different mailers. You've been receiving a lot of mailers about those political commercials and cartoons. Candidates and news media and commentators are trying to entrap certain candidates by their questions. And so often candidates are put between a rock and a hard place as they struggle to answer various questions. Often these questions are asked not so much to hear a person's position on an issue, but rather the questions are asked to entrap someone. Well, that's the dilemma that is similar to the one that Jesus found himself in today's gospel reading. In Matthew 22, verse 15, we read, "Then the Pharisees went and plotted to entrap him in what he said." Another translation says, "The Pharisees met together to think of a way to trap Jesus into saying something for which they could accuse him." The Pharisees wanted to trap Jesus. They wanted to entangle him in his words, to drive a wedge between him and the people. And so they confronted him with a question that they thought would be sure to put him between a rock and a hard place. The Pharisees were so angry it blinded them. Think for a moment about the ironies here. We know because we live on this side of the resurrection that Jesus was and is God. They thought that he was demonic, an agent of Satan. We know that Jesus is the King of Kings. They simply thought he wanted to be the King of Israel. We know that Jesus was the Son of God, is the Son of God. And they thought he was Joseph's and Mary's son. We know that Jesus has influenced the world for almost 2,000 years, and they thought his influence would end at the cross. It's a fascinating story. We look at the Pharisees and we shake our heads. How could they have been so wrong when truth was standing right there in front of them? I believe they were upset because Jesus held them accountable and because Jesus exposed their hypocrisy. "Teacher," they say, "we know that you are sincere and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth." Does anybody believe for a moment that they thought Jesus was sincere? It was a setup. "Tell us," they continue, "what do you think? Is it right to pay taxes to the emperor?" Now maybe we should be grateful to the Pharisees because in their question, which Jesus says was motivated by evil intentions, they prompt one of the greatest teachings of Jesus. Jesus said, "Give to the emperor what is the emperor's, and to God what is God's." The verb there, give, in Jesus' sentence really literally means to give back or to repay. So give back to the emperor what is the emperor's, and give back to God then what is God's. We are told that the Pharisees went out of the temple and laid plans to trap Jesus in his words. That's interesting in itself. They had to go out of the temple, out of the sanctuary to conspire. They dare not do that in that holy place. And when they return, Jesus is presented with this dilemma. If he says, don't pay the tax, they will be able to accuse him before Pilate of anti-Roman activity. If, on the other hand, he says, pay the tax, he might lose favor with the people, for whom the Roman tax was a necessary evil and a symbol of their lost freedom. So what would he do? He calls for a coin, maybe a coin that's similar to the one that's pictured on your sermon outline there. If you were to hold a Roman coin, a denarius, in your hand, you would quickly understand the use that Jesus makes of it. The head displays the reigning emperor, and on the tail an inscription reading Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus, Pontifex Maximus. In other words, that he is the emperor was the high priest of that pagan Roman religion. Now there's a bit of humor here. Standing on the holiest ground in all of Israel, within the temple walls, Jesus' adversaries quickly produced a coin that bears a graven image, an idol. The Ten Commandments warn against the use of idols, and so their hypocrisy is exposed. And then Jesus answers and gives the emperor the things that are the emperor's, to God the things that are God's. I put that quote on your paper that George Weigel, who's a distinguished senior fellow at the Ethics and Public Policy Center of Washington, D.C., has called this a revolutionary text whose public implications have been working themselves out for almost 2 millennia. As a Christian, as citizens of the United States, what does it mean to give the emperor his due? What then is the emperor's? What does rightly belong to our government? That's question number 2. The first T, the letter T there, is for taxes, and that's from Romans 13 that talks about that we, as Christians, we do pay our taxes to the government. That's the first thing we give to our government. The second one with the V is our vote. And come in 2 weeks, in November, if you are a U.S. citizen and of age, it's your duty, it's our duty to vote. We've all learned the value of a vote.